Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of G-Bear Homesteading the Desert. All right, look what we got here. I got tape and mud on the walls. Now, before everybody gets excited, especially you people that wanted to see that technique, I needed to push this ahead because I wanted to make sure I was ready for paint by tomorrow. If I can get this all painted by tomorrow, then I can go pick up the rest of my ceiling panels, get the ceiling in here, get my piece of carpet, get my carpet installed, and I'll be ready to move bed and stuff into this room, and I can show you what I've been doing with my kitchen table. But I didn't forget about you. I left one wall untaped. So I got a inside corner, I've got a low seam, and I've got a piece of corner bead here. I already did the hall side, but I left this side so you can see how corner bead is taped. And then, of course, I've got some screws that are still showing through the drywall here. I did mud as many as I could to push things along. These usually get embedded or covered when I'm putting tape in. Now, here's a little thing about putting drywall screws, nails, whatever. If you break paper like this or like this, you have to move the screw and put another one right beside it. You want the screw to just be below surface of paper. You can do that by feeling it, or as you get a little more experience, you'll be able to see it. But you don't want to, when you're dragging your mudding knife across, you don't want to go click, click and jump over these things. And then you got to tighten them down again, and you got to use your screw gun tip gets into the mud, gets all full of mud. The next time you put it in a screw, it doesn't want to fit. Just a pain in the neck. So make sure that those are all down. You can go around with a drywall knife like this and go like that, and if you don't hear a click, click, you're okay. All right. That being said, one thing I didn't show you yesterday on the tools. This is a hole cutter for drywall, and I always keep a little galvanized nail, which is just a little bit smaller than that needle on there, along with this. And the way you would use this thing is, if I needed to cut a round hole in drywall for like a stovepipe or venting or something like that, you would press this point into the unit after setting your increments on it right here. So you're going to use half of the size of the pipe. So if it's a 4-inch pipe, you'll set this at 2-inch, and that'll cut you a 4-inch hole. All right, so you're going to press that point into the drywall, and then you would run this thing around in a circle a couple of times, and you can see it cuts the paper. Okay, I'm not worried about those. I got to do a second coat of mud on here anyway, so I'll fix those when I go through. Now, once you've cut that paper all the way around on one side, you would take this little nail, press it through the hole so it comes out the other side so you know where it is, what the location is, and then take the nail out, go to the other side, and do the same thing with this and cut through the paper on the other side of the drywall. Once you've got the paper cut on both sides, you can take the butt of your drywall knife or a hammer, and you just hit that thing a couple of times, and it'll pop right out of there. Then you can use your utility knife to clean it up if it's got any rough edges and you want a nice clean hole there. All right, so you don't very often use something like that, but if you're into doing a lot of drywall, you'll need a tool like that down the line. All right, another thing is, I mentioned we try to avoid sanding at all costs. So you can see this is the first coat of mud on here, and I'll be putting a second coat on here that'll be a lot smoother. But you can see right here there's a ridge with high spots. So we use a knife like this, and we just scrape it and knock those high spots down. And that avoids all the dust from the sanding. Then you see some ridges along the corner bead here, and you can clean those up with the edge of your knife like this. And the reason you're doing that is so that when you're putting your second coat on, you've got a fairly smooth surface all the way across here. because you're going to be using a wider knife. So that this is only a 4-inch here, but I would go up to a 10-inch on this one, and I would get my mud going all the way up about that high on here, and then I would give it a nice smooth run across with the whole 10-inch knife. It covers that whole distance. Now what I like to do is I'll scrape the top line first and get that down to surface, and then I can really press my knife in and get a nice smooth run. You'll see me doing that in a little while here. On the initial coat, you're not trying to be super pretty. You're embedding tape. So that's what your purpose is here. You want that tape to be embedded in mud so that it seals all the joints. So if there's any movement in the wall, you don't end up with a crack there. You can see the tape comes down here. Now in the order that you want to go is you always want to start with the low joint first. So we got 3 places of tape here. We got an upright on the corner bead, we got a horizontal on the low joint, and then we got an inside corner over that side. So the low joint is this one. And you can see the gap behind the knife there. It is low. And over on this wall, you can see that's only the first coat on there, but you can see a shadow line across the top and a shadow line across the bottom that goes fairly straight. That's the full distance of this little concave area. So a 6-inch knife covers both all the way across there. So when you've got a joint tape like that on your first run, you've got a properly piece of embedded tape. Okay, now on some of the other joints that are the same thickness, like this one right here, that's an end of a 4-foot and an end of a 4-foot end of full sheets come together. They're not recessed like this is. So here you have to go out a little further, and that's where the big 12-inch knife comes in. Because you can go 12 inches on each side of the tape to feather out so you don't see a hump in your wall when you're all done. So this type of joint will take 3, sometimes 4 coats to get it so you don't see a hump in the wall. All right. You can see here, there's a little skip area right there. And there's the shadow line for the 6-inch from there to there. So I'm not worried about this. When I put the second coat over that, I'm going to be going from like down here to up here. And it's just a wider coat, and it'll cover the tape. You won't see the tape at all. And if I get that really, really smooth, I'm going to have very little sanding to do. And I'll be ready. Now, if you're going to texture the walls, you're going to blow texture on the walls after you mud, you don't have to be so super critical. But if you're doing a smooth coat of paint like I'm going to be doing, then you've got to be a little bit more critical on your joints and make sure they look smooth, and you don't have hollows like this, because those will show up through the paint when you're done. All right, over here I did put on a second coat to show you how much wider it goes out across the joints and around the window. So I came all the way around the window with a second coat on here already. So this one's got some rough spots on it. Not a big deal. When I get the second coat on everything, I run my big sander across with my vacuum connected, and I get everything knocked down, and then I go back and I just touch up the little hollows, like even this screw. It's got a little hollow in it. I'll go back over that, and I'll put a little bit of mud over it so I don't have a divot in my wall when I'm done painting. All right, that being said, we're running a little long here. It's already 9 minutes in. I am going to connect this into the tripod so that I can grab my knife and pan and get ready to start working. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see. Get this adjusted here. All right. Now, I'm not going to tape the whole corner joint and all of that. I'm just going to do a small section so you can see the technique. And it's the same thing for the whole joint, but I'm just going to do a small section right here so that you can see how it works. All right, give me a minute while I load up my mud pan here. All right. My tape here. This is my big roll of tape. I went all the way through the other smaller roll already, so I'll be using this one to do this little part. Now, one of the things that I like doing when I'm doing joints, now remember I said I've got to do the low joint first, not the corner joint. So what I do is I pick up some mud like that on the knife, and then I turn my knife this way and I just drag it along and spread that mud out. Now I can go back and get a nice wide spread on there. See how easy that was? Okay, once I've done that all the way across the joint, I'll take my tape like this, I hold it through the center, and you can see it dangling right there. Then what I do is I just turn it sideways and it unwinds. Turn it back and it stops. Okay, so now I can take this tape and just run it between my fingers here, and it takes all the curling out of the tape and flattens it out for me. Then I can put it in the corner there, center of my joint, and I just get that end there, and I go lightly first just to set the tape in place. Okay, so now that the tape is in place, I come back and I'm going to put my knife about halfway on there, and I'm going to press with a little bit of firmness and take a scrape. Now you see the mud that came off. When you get that mud off like that, you want to clean your knife so that you're ready to do the next part of it. Now I'm going to go up on the top half and do the same thing. Now you see how nice and seamed that tape is. Now lastly, I'm going to come across one more time right across the center. And you see the little bit of mud that came off on both sides right there? That's all there is to it. Cutting a piece of tape, let me turn the camera here a little bit. Cutting a piece of tape that you have on the wall, when you need to cut it off, you're going to put your blade against there, perpendicular, and it just tear the paper. And you can clean that off. Now I'll be ready to continue from that point on when I do the rest of this after I cut the camera off. All right. Now for a corner, it's pretty much the same. We pick up the mud out of the pan the same way, and then we're going to come down one side right here, pick up a little more mud, come down the other side right there. And that's, by the way, is one of the reasons that you have the rounded edges on this thing. So when you're working in a corner here, the edge of the knife that isn't squared off and it doesn't scrape the mud off the other side. So you don't want too much mud. You don't want it really super thick. I look at it as the mud when you're taping is basically a glue that's going to hold the tape in place. All right. Now you remember I showed you this tape has a seam already right down the center of it, so you can grab it like this and fold it. Okay. Now you just drag your hand along it and it'll fold right up. So now I can take this piece of tape and I can stick it into a corner, and I use the edge of my knife to tap it into the corner right like that. And when I get down to where I want to cut it off, I can pull it back, bring it to one side, and then get my knife in place and tear it right off. Okay? Now you're going to go down one side and then down the other side. And that's how you tape a corner or an inside corner. Okay? And again, don't be too worried about how pretty this is. This is the original taping. You've got plenty of time to do work on it later. Now you see how I hit that one? That's right. I would never do two joints right in a row like that. I would work on something else before I came over and did two joints together, because you're always going to hit a tape and drag it off. Now if you see a place here that the tape didn't stick because you didn't have any mud behind it, you can take a little mud on your knife, slide it under the tape, go like that, and then come down and dress it out. Very simple. All right, I'm going to move the pan over here to the end, move my tape over to the end, and move the camera over to the end. Let me see where we're at here. All right. I think that's got a pretty good view there. All right, again, I want to do the low joint first. Always keep your knife clean. It doesn't have to be spotless, but you don't want anything on it like that on both sides of it when you're starting to do something like this. So you keep using the edge of your pan to scrape the knife off. Okay, so I'm going to do a little area right here so that I can do this corner bead. And another thing, you probably saw some mud fall. There's some on the wall down here. You can pick that up, put it back in your pan, and keep using it. If you by chance drop some mud on the floor, like on my hardwood floors over here or on carpeting, don't worry about it and don't mess with it. Let it dry. If you try cleaning it up while it's wet, it just smears and grinds in deeper. So just let it dry. When it's dry, it's like a solid chunk, and you can scrape it right off. And on the carpeting, you just take a stiff bristled brush, a nylon brush, and you can brush it right out of the carpeting and vacuum up the dust. All right, so let's get this tape here. Now, the reason you do a low joint first when you're doing drywall mudding is because you want this piece of tape on the corner here to be as straight as possible. You don't want it to come to a hole here and have a hollow behind the tape. So by adding this first piece of tape on there, I've made it even with the metal corner bead. So now when I put this tape on, it's got a flat surface coming all the way down the wall. All right, so on this one, it's much like doing a joint. You're going to spread some mud. Now note that the corner here of a corner bead is raised up a little bit higher than the rest of the corner bead. So when you put your mud on here, you're going to get your tape buried in there. I leave 1/8 of an inch gap between the end of the tape and the metal. And I'll show you a reason for that in a second here. Let me clean my knife. Cut off this excess tape. All right. Now when I come down and I clean this, you can hold it with your finger too to keep it from dragging off. Okay. I'm doing half the tape there. And I cleaned off that excess mud. Now I can come over a little further because I can't go this way. And when I press here and I go down, you'll see it kind of like squeeze out along the corner bead. Okay, so now I can just take my knife and clean that off. That way I know that I've got a good tight mudded seal between my tape and my corner bead. Now the object of putting tape over the corner bead is so that this joint right here, or this joint right here, does not crack later on, because it's a metal against paper, so you're going to end up with a crack down there if you don't tape it like I did here. Now, if you notice, the seam where you would fold the tape actually aligns with the edge of the metal, and that gives you an 1/8 inch gap on this side. So that's a little guide that you can use when you're doing this. All right. lastly, let me go down here. Well, not lastly, but next. All right, we can see screws here. And again, they are just below the surface of the paper. So I'm going to take a little mud on my knife here. I'm going to strike it across those holes and then do a crisscross clean off on it. Okay, that's all there is to it. Now those will set and they'll sink a little bit in the center. I'll come back later, use a dry knife to take high spots off, and then put a little bit more on there, and it's ready for a quick scuff sand and ready for it to start texturing or whatever your next step would be. All right. Let me pick up the camera here out of the tripod again. I hope the